Jay?
The dude in his first year being healthy went to the Super Bowl.
Took an Aaron Donald play to stop him.
That gives you some swag that can carry on and translate for a long time in your career.
You know, the Bengals are flying under the radar to a degree as one of the 5 best teams in football. I think you could argue that they're the most complete team in the AFC in a lot of ways, right? What is it? They've won 8 in a row? Or 10 out of 11, right? I don't think people have really given the Bengals nationally quite the credit they deserve.
Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals are heading back to the playoffs for the second straight season. Early on in the season, it looked like the Bengals were heading towards a hangover after their magical run to the Super Bowl, but Cincinnati was able to fight back and even go on an 8-game winning streak despite missing Jamar Chase for 4 weeks. The Bengals are the 3 seed in the AFC and have proven down the stretch that they are a force to be reckoned with and looking to win the conference again. Meanwhile, Joe Burrow has gone from a magical sophomore season to one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. The Cincinnati Bengals kind of got off to a rough start this season. Cincinnati went down 17-3 early to the Steelers and looked pretty bad in week 1. The Bengals did climb their way back to tie it on a pass to Jamar Chase with 2 seconds remaining, but the PAT was blocked. Pittsburgh drilled a field goal with no time remaining in overtime to win it. The next week, Cincinnati lost to Dallas, who were starting Cooper Rush for the first time after Dak Prescott went down. The serious question was whether or not the Bengals were for real, because Cincinnati didn't look like the same Bengals team we saw late last season. Cincinnati did win its next 2 versus the Jets and Dolphins, who, while they did both completely fall apart down the stretch, were pretty good early on. Cincinnati lost to the Ravens in week 5 to go back to a losing record 2-3. But the Bengals wouldn't have another losing record for the rest of the year. The Bengals won back-to-back versus the Saints and Falcons before losing to the Browns in week 8 to return to 500. That loss to Cleveland was on October 31st. The Bengals have not lost a game since. It's been over 2 months since Cincinnati lost. The Bengals dropped 41 on Carolina before riding into their bye week, week 10 at 5-4. Cincinnati had some close ones, but came out on top every single time. The Bengals won 3 consecutive one-score games versus Pittsburgh, Tennessee, and Kansas City. 2 comfortable wins over the Browns and Buccaneers followed. Cincinnati had a bit of a scare week 16, but did ultimately beat the Patriots to sit at 11-4 heading into week 17. The Bengals Monday Night Football game versus Buffalo was suspended, and the league decided not to resume the game following the collapse of Damar Hamlin. Luckily, Damar is doing much better. It certainly made things a bit confusing going into week 18 when it comes to the playoff picture. The NFL declared that the Bengals had won the division due to a higher win percentage, but if Baltimore did defeat Cincinnati and the 2 teams were only a half game apart because the Bengals played one last game essentially, home field advantage between the 2 in the postseason would be decided by a coin flip. That didn't end up mattering ultimately, but the Bengals were upset with how the situation was handled. Joe Mixon scored the first touchdown of the game in week 18 versus Baltimore and ended up celebrating by flipping a coin in a poke at the NFL. Cincinnati beat the Ravens 27-16 to improve to 12-4 on the back of 215 yards and a touchdown from Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow got off to a very rough start this season. In that week 1 loss to Pittsburgh, Burrow looked awful. He ended up tossing 4 interceptions. It was maybe the worst performance of his pro career, but it didn't last. Burrow didn't blow anyone away early in the season, as you'd expect, but he wasn't as reckless and bad as he was in week 1. Over the next 6 weeks, Burrow looked as you'd expect. 1,700 yards, 13 touchdowns, and only 1 interception. The Bengals' offense looked really different after week 7, though. Jamar Chase suffered a hip injury and ended up missing 4 games. In those 4 games without Chase, Burrow threw for 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. The biggest disparity really came in terms of completion percentage. Burrow completed less than 67% of his passes without Chase, and then in the next 4 games with him, he completed 71% with 1,100 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. Joe Burrow came out of nowhere in 2021 to put his name in the hat for one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He ended up leading the NFL in completion percentage and yards per attempt. Burrow threw for 4,600 yards, 34 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. touchdowns. It was a major difference from his rookie year. He had that gigantic breakout in his sophomore season, like we've seen with guys like Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson do. Burrow was pretty good his first year in the league while he was playing. He only played in 10 games before he suffered a pretty bad knee injury that left his ACL and MCL torn and suffered damage to his PCL and meniscus. Burrow finished his rookie year with 2,600 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. He showed some promise as a rookie, but the stark difference was the Bengals' record. Cincinnati went 2-7-1 with Burrow under center in 2020, but looked like a new team in 2021. The Bengals went 10-6 with Burrow starting and got to the postseason and got hot at the right time. Cincinnati downed the Raiders in the wildcard round, beat the Titans in the divisional round, and escaped the Chiefs in overtime in the AFC Championship. The Bengals had 4 consecutive one-score games in the postseason, but ultimately couldn't get it done and lost to the Rams in the Super Bowl. The complete turnaround of the Bengals was shocking, but was fully due to good decisions by Cincinnati, which nobody would have expected. It was clear that the Bengals needed offensive line help after Joe Burrow's rookie season. Cincinnati had the 5th overall pick at the 2021 NFL Draft, and pretty much everyone expected the Bengals to go Penei Sewell, but Cincinnati went another direction, selecting Jamar Chase. Chase was so good at LSU, and Burrow was his quarterback. Chase was incredible as a rookie. He ended up winning Offensive Rookie of the Year after he had 1,455 yards, the most in a single season by a rookie wide receiver. Couple Chase with some already pretty good weapons in Cincinnati, and the Bengals have been great, mostly because of their drafting. T. Higgins just wrapped up his second straight 1,000-yard season. The Bengals selected him in the second round in 2020. Tyler Boyd had 4 consecutive seasons with over 800 yards from 2018 to 2021, including 2 with over 1,000 yards. Boyd was a 2016 second-round pick. At running back, Joe Mixon has 3 1,000-yard rushing seasons in his career since Cincinnati took him in the second round of the 2017 NFL Draft. The Bengals have made a lot of good decisions at the draft, and selecting Burrow has been a huge one too, even if he was just the first overall pick. Now, I've had a lot of good takes, and I've had a lot of bad takes. We've been doing this for years now, but I don't think I've ever been more wrong about a single player more than Joe Burrow. He was so much fun to watch his last year at LSU, and that was a very magical season, but it was hard to measure how big of a factor Burrow was. That offense was straight up unstoppable. Justin Jefferson was tearing it up, and Jamar Chase was really even better than he was. When the passing game wasn't working, which literally never happened, LSU could just hand it off to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. It was definitely a little worrisome that he had went from not very good to breaking the single-season FBS record with 60 touchdowns in just 1 year. Burrow had a lot of easy reads and below-average arm strength. If I'm being honest, I prefer Tua Tagovailoa and Justin Herbert over him, but I was wrong. Joe Burrow doesn't have the physical traits as Justin Herbert, and that's okay. Burrow has managed to have a Tom Brady type of play style in a way. He has a ridiculously high football IQ. Burrow has elite pocket presence, and he has elite ball placement. He's not exactly a mobile quarterback, but he makes off-schedule plays and makes things happen once a play breaks down. I thought Cincinnati would return to average this season, but that wasn't the case. Once Jamar Chase got hurt, I really thought Burrow was going to struggle, but he didn't. Joe Burrow continued to look incredible. He is quickly becoming one of the best quarterbacks in the pros, and I'm finally starting to believe in him. Joe Burrow is amazing, and I could not have been more wrong about him.